Good day, everyone. Everyone knows how awful the Dragonsong War was. A 1,000-year battle that nobody truly won. Only a millennium of pain and suffering would be gained by either side of this conflict. We know how it ended and how high the stakes had been raised before the end. We also understand how it began with the betrayal of King Thordan I. But what many don't realize is just how ruinous his decision was, and how the countless innocent lives that would pay for his hubris were not limited to Ishgard alone. No, Thordan was a self-serving madman whose actions will haunt Eorzea forever. So today we're going to discuss the exact nature of his betrayal and how we'll never truly be freed from his actions. Many people have heard the story of how King Thordan of Ishgard, along with his Knights 12, managed to betray and kill the dragon Retatoskr. What makes this event more terrible than normal are the conditions it happened under. It was the mid-300s of the Succestral Era when a large migration of Wildwood Elezen would migrate north into Kurthus due to a sudden influx of Hyur within central Aldenard. This made the dragons of Dravania their neighbors, but on most days their relationship was simply passive-aggressive. The builders of this early Ishgard had no interest in the dragons, and likewise, most dragons had no interest in them. It wasn't until the love between Saint Shiva and Hraesvelgr bloomed that both man and dragon began to understand the powerful bonds they could forge between their people. With Hraesvelgr consuming Shiva and merging their very souls, the example was set. As various Elezen and dragons began to speak, travel, and learn together. When the dragons speak of a paradise lost, they meant it. The civilization that the early Ishgardians and dragons were building together was something out of a fairy tale. Massive buildings and sculptures built atop floating islands, with dragons carrying their mortal friends between them. It was indeed an era of unprecedented peace, and Hydaelyn herself likely smiled at the joy created between these adopted aliens and native children. For almost 200 years, things were perfect, and looked to get even better because of one dragon in particular, Retatoskr. She was unique amongst her siblings, because Retatoskr saw the great potential between dragons and mortals coexisting. Hraesvelgr and Shiva may have set the bar, but Retatoskr wished to see just how far those bonds could be carried. This is why she often acted as a diplomat between dragons and man, especially with her brother, Nidhogg. Now, Nidhogg was never a kind or empathetic creature, but he was understandably wary of the mortals that so many dragons were now living alongside. After all, thousands of years ago, it was the madness of Aemon and Xande that marched against and ultimately killed his brother, Bahamut. Nidhogg was only giving the Elezen of Kurthus this second chance because of Retatoskr, because she saw this as an opportunity to prove that not all mortals are so single-minded. Hraesvelgr only truly loved Shiva, and cared little for the affairs of mortals past that. Meanwhile, Nidhogg was a dragon supremacist who looked down on the races of our world as lesser beings. This meant that Retatoskr alone was the only member of the first brood in Dravania that was hoping for a brighter future. Much to her pleasure, generations of peace would make Nidhogg's paranoia start to look unreasonable and even toxic in some cases. How glorious the modern-day Ishgard could have been were it not for one man. A single Elezen who was given power and authority that a feeble heart such as his should never have been bestowed. This, of course, was King Thordan I. Thordan looked upon the culture that man and dragon had built, but didn't see coexistence. What he saw was inequality, and this instilled a deep-seated unease and insecurity within Thordan. He, as well as most people, understood that dragons were more powerful than they were. But most Elezen were fine with this, as they understood that such power would never be used against them, not after Shiva's example or with Retatoskr's support. Yet, despite all the good that had come from this union, Thordan was made restless by his own weakness, and ultimately he was terrified of dragons like Nidhogg that saw mortals as lesser beings. Thordan's insecurity was easily manipulated. So when he discovered that a dragon's essence was focused within their eyes, he already knew what he was going to do. And so the story goes. He, along with his knights, would murder Ratatoskr in cold blood and partake of her power. Thordan's desires were exceedingly short-sighted. He was prepared to throw away everything that his people had built with the Dragonkin just to satisfy his own ego and pride. He couldn't imagine a world where he and his fellow men weren't powerful enough to stand against something as mighty as a dragon. Some may believe that his actions were simply to give mortals the power to stand as tall, if not taller, than the dragons themselves. But this would again be proven a falsehood, as history has proven, time and again, that mortals of exquisite stock have risen up with great power and strength to challenge the very gods themselves, all without draconic power. Thordan held no belief that man could grow as powerful as dragons on their own, and as such, he would kill and steal that power instead. Nidhogg was unfortunately proven right. That no matter how peaceful or prosperous a civilization can become, all it takes is the selfish desires of one person to bring it all crumbling down. Even someone as single-minded as he was prepared to give the early Ishgardians a second chance, an excuse to prove him wrong. But Thordan took that chance away from not only his people, but the entire world. This betrayal is something we'll never completely recover from, as dragons across Etheirys have now seen two separate occasions in which the madness of mortals had killed who they saw as the greatest among them. Bahamut and Ratatoskr, two dragons who saw potential in cooperation, were slain by hubris. The first was killed simply for defending his home, and the second was stabbed in the back by those she called friend. This is why so many dragons outside of Nidhogg's brood hate and despise the mortal races. Even if Xande's crusade against Bahamut was forgiven, Thordan's treachery proves that mortals can never be entirely trusted regardless of the era. To many dragons, this alone is grounds for hostile engagement, which is why it's not uncommon for them to be seen attacking people even after the end of the Dragonsong War. So long as man and dragon exist together, there will always be some aggression between the two groups. Now, it must be stated that the Ascians are usually and ultimately responsible for encouraging most worldly disasters on some level. Depending on who you ask, the Ascians were openly encouraging the prospects of the Dragonsong War just to keep their new foes distracted. This was because, as unsundered beings, Midgardsormr and his children posed a greater threat to the Ascians and their plans than any other creature on the world. But even with that in mind, it's understandable that Midgardsormr himself would not sympathize with those who became their tools. From the dragon's point of view, anyone could have stood up against their crazed leaders. Any of Thordan's 12 knights could have refused to fight or stop their lord's ambition. Any political or military leaders during Xande's conquest could have denied the orders given to them. To the dragons, a mortal's sense of honor is hollow and without worth. As history has proven, honor has been used as an excuse to commit atrocities. This is why they didn't stop Nidhogg. Despite the innocent lives he claimed, Nidhogg's rampage was justified on multiple levels. It wasn't until dragons and mortals both agreed to lay down their arms together that any semblance of peace could be enjoyed. But no matter how grand of a society man and dragon may create once more, true peace will never be achieved. There will always be dragons who hate the mortal races of our world, and with good reason. Thordan had a chance. A chance to prove that despite his weakness against the Dragonkin, he would find his own way for man to match the might of dragons. He could have learned about the truth of a dragon's eyes and said, "No, I refuse to be an animal feasting on the bodies of my allies." He could have proven that, like Shiva before him, he would embrace the dream of a world beyond anything he could imagine. But Thordan I was never such a king. He was so scared of Nidhogg's power, and yet, Nidhogg only attacked and killed him after he betrayed Ratatoskr. Thordan had created his own worst nightmare, and became the center of everything he was afraid of. Nidhogg, on the other hand, may never have been kind, but given time, he might have found something to admire about the resilience of man. After all, his eye did see potential in every Azure Dragoon that served Ishgard. So, in a better reality, he may have taught us the true meaning of strength and how to use it. But now we'll never know. Thordan's foolishness took so much from the world, and only gave back pain. Hopefully his example serves as an adequate warning, because if the dragons are attacked without reason a third time, Megardzemer himself might glass the land with fire. So take this knowledge to heart, and stay safe, my friends. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Big shout out to my patrons, Rovakis, Monsolo97, Potato, Runatir, The Yellow Couch, Papaya Cyan, and Vivalis Oma. If you want to see more lore content in the future, share this with your friends. My dream is to share as much as I find with as many people as possible. And if you do end up helping me, thank you so much in advance. And have a wonderful day.